So hi everyone, Babula and I are back with you this, full moon, is it, Babula? Yes, at the moment? Yeah.
Yes, tomorrow it's exact, but yeah, we're at full moon time.
Yeah, so now I don't know about you, I know in the last time we spoke, which was the first in this series of Astro Updates, we talked about the influence of all the planets, and I was particularly paying attention to Saturn because for me, I've been feeling the tightening of the noose a lot. And because I have Saturn on my sun anyway, but I'm feeling it a lot. Sort of squeezing the stuffing out of things, don't you think?
Yes, good expression. Yes.
But with that comes, with all the restrictions, in order to create order, I guess, and in doing so, creating structure so we can move all through this. So why don't you start off with talking about that? That Saturnian influence that's so well known to astrologers.
Yeah, that's a really good place to start actually, because Saturn's a real key player in this whole, if not the key player in many ways in this whole situation that's going on. So just to kind of briefly give it a little bit of context, as we spoke of last time, and as astrologers have been aware for some years actually, watching this coming with Pluto in Capricorn. Capricorn is ruled by the planet Saturn. So it's like Saturn is Capricorn's planet. Pluto's been moving through here for many years, and 2 years ago Saturn moved into Capricorn as well in his own sign, making him especially powerful and strong. When a planet's in its own sign, it's on. It's like when we're in our own domain, I can really fully be myself here. And it's like, that's true for planets when they come into their own sign. It gives them that extra strength. And Saturn's no lightweight guy anyway, it means business if we speak of the planets as kind of entities or beings in a way, just as a way of speaking about it. So Saturn, and any Saturnian person, like you're not a Capricorn, but you have Saturn on your sun. People who have strong Capricorn energy or strong Saturn placements will know this, that Saturn demands focus, dedication, deliberation. Like, we're not messing around. This is Saturn's voice. We're not messing around here. This is real. Get on with it. Deal with the task. And with it, there will be challenges, obstacles, constraints. That word constraint, which is often used by astrologers to describe Saturn, is so real now. Like, everything is being constrained, tightened, constricted, and we're having to do without. We haven't got freedom of movement, and money's, people are losing their jobs and so on, and there's a lot of anxiety and fear, which is Saturn. Even like Saturn rules the base chakra. We can look at the planets, particularly the 7 visible planets, as ruling each of the 7 main chakras. So Saturn is base chakra stuff. Bottom line, survival. And so people go into survival anxiety when Saturn is strongly active. And that's why we saw so much panic buying. Like, it just hits people's bottom line survival anxiety and can generate panic. But if we're really working well with Saturn, we're going, okay, these are the constrained conditions that my parameters have shrunk, have tightened. This is what I'm working with, and there's no way around it. There's just, and the police are out now making sure people are not wandering about needlessly, and police are ruled by Saturn. The government is ruled by Saturn and Capricorn. And so there are so many factors, playing into this Saturn and Capricorn theme, and we know that in January, Saturn and Pluto were together. So, but Saturn, I always say about Saturn, he's a really good guy disguised as a pain in the ass. That to me is what Saturn's like. Like, it's very purposeful. Like, Saturn is necessary. When there's too much expand, sooner or later, it's just energetics, you know, there has to be a contraction.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really key point here. Like, you know, this idea of just endless economic growth, well, sooner or later, wait a minute, this simply cannot go on forever. And that's a part of this whole Saturn-Pluto story in Capricorn as well. We're now seeing the results in many ways of all that excess, you know, and now it's just that's happening.
Yeah.
So, and each of us are experiencing that in different ways, and some are traveling well with that and some are not. And that will depend on how Saturn's playing out in each of our own individual charts, how this whole Saturn-Pluto-Jupiter story, how is it triggering your own natal chart? And that's why we all have kind of a different response.
So our natal chart is a bit like when you're born, the universe takes a photo because you've been imprinted with the energy of the planets that are where they are at the time that you're born, and you're sort of like you're stamped with it for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
You can move around in it, but that's your template, isn't it? That's your astrological template.
It is. That's your template. That's your journey, your story, your blueprint, if you like. Like, people sometimes joke and say, "Look, I wish we came with a guide map." Well, we kind of do, actually. You know, it's the horoscope, and that's an incredible guide, and helps us to make so much sense of our life. You know, during really great times and during not so great times. Yeah.
So there's other things going on at the moment. And you produce a newsletter, so I was looking at that intensely. And you had in there, I think, Taurus conjunct Uranus square Saturn in Aquarius. Is that right?
Yes. The planet Uranus last year moved into the sign of Taurus. Now, that's a really big piece of this story as well. Like, we're all experiencing in the world now, there are so many astrological pieces to it. Definitely the Capricorn story is like probably the core piece, but all these other parts. So, and we did talk a bit about Taurus last time, I recall, about how Taurus has, you know, considerable resistance to change, understandably, because it's not its nature. And Uranus, for 7 years now, is in the sign of Taurus, causing great disturbance, disruption, change, upheaval, shockwaves into our economic systems, into our sense of our stable base. It's being rocked. You know, it's been really, really rocked. But I've been looking into this piece with great interest because it's fascinated me from the start. Like, Uranus and Taurus to me is so interesting because they're so different to each other energetically. And I gave, in fact, one of the talks I gave at the astrology conference in Melbourne in January was on Uranus in Taurus, and I actually called it something like a return to Earth, the awakening of the wild feminine, and I was relating that not exclusively but largely to Uranus going through Taurus, because Taurus is also about our relationship to the earth, to nature, to the land as a source of food and sustenance, and we haven't been treating that very well for a long time. So this is, again, like another massive Uranian wake-up call around our resources, around our relationship to the earth, around money and finances. It's all just changing on a daily basis now. And so absolutely the square from Uranus in Taurus to Saturn in Aquarius, which is ruled by Uranus, is very, very interesting. And I think it really heightens and emphasizes the collective story of this reality. Like, you know, that there are countries and states and cultural groups, but when we step back, which is the Uranian view, you know, we see that actually we're all, and we're hearing this phrase on a daily basis again now, aren't we? We're all in this together. Everybody's saying it. I think that reality is hitting home. We are all
Yeah. So for those people who are watching, just to quickly explain a square as opposed to a trine, because a lot of lay people are watching this. So just explain that to them.
So if we look at, say, Aquarius and Taurus, these two signs we've just been speaking about, in the chart, they line up with two other signs, Leo and Scorpio, and they literally form a cross in the chart or a square. And so two planets in square to each other are literally 90 degrees away in the circle from each other. So if we go back to, you know, high school geometry and think about a circle, it's 360 degrees. If we divide it up into 4 segments, we've got like 4 squares. And one of those squares is 90 degrees. So signs that are in square to each other in the circle, in the zodiac, hold a tension. You know, it's not an easy flow of energy. Whereas the trine, we divide the circle by 3, you know, trine equals 3. And those signs, like all the three earth signs, they're in a grand trine with each other. There's a beautiful harmonious connection and flow between them. They're sort of all in mutual agreement, but they're all different to each other, but they're all earth. But with the squares, you've got one earth, one water, one air, one fire, and they kind of struggle with each other. And yet, signs that are square to each other, and when we get planets line up in square, the tension between them can actually cause something really fruitful to happen because we're under pressure. You know, there's a tension and a pressure here that sort of forces us to get really creative and kind of resolve this issue, this tension. Whereas we can get a little bit lazy around the trines, for example, because it's just, you know, it's pretty easy, it's happening, you don't have to put much effort in. Yeah, I hope that's a helpful way to sort of understand this. So yeah, there's a tension, there's pressure between so many factors now, and I can see, you know, no matter what our political views and affiliations might be, I'm actually beginning to have a little bit of compassion for governments and world leaders now, because they're in a really tight spot and they're having to deal with some really hard, tough issues, and they may not always make decisions that we agree with, but you can see the tension and stress on their faces.
Yeah, but there is that spirit of governments cooperating now.
Yes.
You know, that's energy has come into play where, like, even they've been saying that Wednesday night we're going to sit down and we're going to make sure that this happens, that money is going to go through, it's going to be legislated so that everyone's financially, you know, better off regardless of how bad things get, you know, they can survive. And I found that really interesting to see that happening, that spirit of cooperation. And I was speaking to a friend yesterday who has been on a benefit for a while, and I know she has struggled to survive on it, to pay rent, and struggle to live on $80 a fortnight after she pays rent. Yeah. And it's like, for me, it's like a tipping of the scales. It's coming back more into balance, and I'm wondering if that plays into that, particularly now that moon in Libra that we've got. Is that sort of that energy sort of coming into that as well, or what?
Yeah, that would certainly be contributing to this. The moon changes sign every 2.5 days, you know, so that's like, and while she's in Libra, which she is now, as we come to the full moon, then absolutely it is about trying to find balance. And because the full moon will be full in the sign of Libra, that brings a lot of energy to it, and it brings a lot of focus to it, like the moon is fully illuminated in the sign of Libra, and Libra is about balance and fairness and justice and the right thing and, you know, equilibrium. Absolutely. And Libra also governs the law and the law courts as well.
It's also about relationships too, isn't it? Like how you relate to, not just in a one-on-one partnership, but how you relate to all sorts of things, isn't it?
Yes, yes, it is, absolutely. And of course, again, individuals will be dealing with their relationships in different ways as well. And some relationships are going to, there's a lot of jokes and memes and funnies going around Facebook and so on. But a lot of people's relationships, particularly if they're working from home or they've lost their jobs and everybody's at home, will be under a new kind of a pressure. And I think some relationships will come out of this really well, and others are going to really experience a lot of strain and perhaps reveal and expose, cracks and things that perhaps haven't been going well for a while, and, bringing things to the surface.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on.
I think so.
Yeah, let's dig down deep here and let's see what's going on.
We're in this enclosed space together now, and I can't just run away.
Yeah. So what else has been happening since we last spoke? I can't remember when that was. A week ago, 2 weeks ago?
About 2 weeks ago. Well, great question. I'm glad you asked, because
kind of getting around to it.
That's right. Venus, lovely Venus, who is the brightest star in our sky. And interesting, Venus Aphrodite is the only planet that is actually named after a feminine deity. She's Venus Aphrodite. All the other planets in our solar system were originally named after gods, because we live in a patriarchal era. So she, and her symbol, of course, is, and I can just hold it up here, I can see that's her symbol, which is, I've got paint under my fingernails. I paint when I have a spare moment. It's hard to get it all out. So she is the feminine, and she represents feminine beauty and the impulse to share and relate and connect. She's the heart. She's the goddess of love and beauty. And she's recently just moved into the sign of Gemini. That happened on April the 4th, which is just a couple of days ago. Now, Venus moves quite quickly. She'll move through the 12 signs of the zodiac in 12 months. So she's a fast-moving inner planet. In fact, she sits between Earth and the sun. So she's, whizzing around the sun pretty quickly. But every 20 months, she goes through a retrograde period. And why it's very relevant that Venus has now just come into Gemini is that on the 13th of May, she's going to turn retrograde or appear to go backwards in the sky. Planets don't change direction, but from Earth, it looks as though they do. In the sign of Gemini. And this means she's going to be in Gemini this time, not for a month, but for about 3 months. It's quite a while. And she's going to go through this 6-week retrograde phase. Now, there's so many things we could say about that. It's quite an important piece of this story. So just to kind of keep it really simple, whatever sign Venus is going through, she's bringing with her this urge to want to share and relate and create beauty and heartfelt connection and so on. And when she's in the sign of Gemini, and some of the people listening and watching to this might have Venus in Gemini in their chart. They might have been born when Venus was in Gemini. Her urge to relate is through the Gemini field, which is all about communication and words and language. So if somebody was like a Venus in Gemini art form would probably be writing. It would be the gift and love of words and language and a natural capacity. My son has Venus in Gemini. He has amazing access to language and use of language, and did from the time he was very little. It's just a natural thing. And when Venus is in Gemini, we want to connect. We want to go and see our friends and sit in coffee shops and chat and gossip and catch up and say, oh, you know, just have you seen this movie? And I've got to tell you about this. And it's that love of communicating and connecting. Well, we're all in our houses now and we can't go out and meet our friends. We can't have friends over and socialise. You know, beaches are being closed, movies, cinemas have all been shut down. So this is a super interesting time where that Venus urge to connect and communicate and share and just enjoy ourselves socially, because she's very much about enjoyment and pleasure. Having to find new ways to do that. And different people will do that differently. And some people will struggle with that lack of access to their friends and their people. Yeah. And just one more, go on, you say what you wanted to say.
I was just going to say, so basically we're going to talk our way through the pandemic. We're going to talk and talk and talk.
Yes.
And we're going to value, because Venus is about values too, isn't it?
Yes.
So we're going to value that conversation.
That's right.
To talk our way through it. And particularly females, because we talk, that's how we process things. We just talk through it, you know.
We do.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And you know, so online, you know, I mean, I'm a Facebook girl. That's my main social media form, and I'm on there every day. I'm quite active there. I have Gemini on the midheaven. You know, it's just need to kind of share, but it's also about sharing information. You see, Gemini is also about education and information. Very much. And so there's information just flying around everywhere. Like, you know, you can't turn on the TV. It's hard to find something just enjoyable to watch, because like everywhere you turn, you know, there's a news bulletin, there's another breaking news, you know, there's political leaders up speaking, you know, the latest updates, so all that's going on. So, you know, we're going also into a bit of overload in a way, like it's just almost too much coming. How to sift through that. And I think if we remember that Venus is about enjoyment and trying to find ways to experience and share information that's also enjoyable and helps us to actually connect from the heart. Heartfelt, real connection.
Yeah.
Is a key.
I saw a lovely example on that a couple of days ago. You might have seen it too. I think I shared it to my own page or to my and it was on ABC News, and it was about a group of people, how they used to go, called pub choir, how they used to go into pubs and create a choir with the people who were there. And now they've had to go online, so they call it couch choir. And they had all of these people that they had gathered on the screen. It looked like 100, but I don't know how many there were. But they'd gotten people to send in bits and pieces of this song, which was the Carpenters' song, Close to You, which is what we all really want to be at the moment. You know, want to be close to each other. And they put it online, and you can see all the little faces on the screen. And it's just beautiful. It was so touching and just moved my heart, you know, that it struck a chord, I think, for a lot of people. But it was a great example, I thought, of that communication, the beauty of it. You know, you touched on creativity before too, didn't you?
That's right. That's right. People getting very creative. I mean, even, you know, you and I, you know, we've begun this series, and we, you know, we're so in enjoyment of having this conversation with each other and hoping that other people can enjoy it and maybe receive something of value from it, or even a little snippet of something might go, that's what I needed to know, you know.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And so we're kind of gleaning bits from different, and it's a way to keep people feeling connected. It's super, super interesting. The other thing, two more things I want to say about this Gemini piece as well. It's actually another thing as well. So Venus will go retrograde for 6 weeks, and that's often a bit of a challenging time for relationships. But Hygeia, the goddess of healing, is in Gemini, and she comes out of the Roman Greek tradition, and she's an asteroid. And there were temples all over the ancient classical world to her, and they were healing temples. So she's also in Gemini, and the North Node is going to move into Gemini soon. It's been in Cancer for 18 months. So there's quite an emphasis. And medically, I think it's really relevant to say that medically the sign of Gemini governs the lungs and our airways. And this virus, its main target, if you like, is the lungs. And so I'm, every and then I'm sharing something on Facebook about breathing exercises. If you have done yoga, you will have been taught breathing techniques. That different people are now sharing things online about like daily breathe, getting outside, move your body, breathe, get fresh air into our lungs, keep those lungs expanded, oxygenated. I think that's a really important piece of this story with so much emphasis on the sign of Gemini.
So what's the significance of the North Node moving into that? Tell people about the North Node and what it means that it's moved in there.
Okay, great. So the North and South Node are an axis across the chart. They're not planets, and you can't see them in a telescope, but they're not physical bodies. They're points in space. It is related to the movement of the moon around the Earth as the Earth goes around the sun, but that's all we need to know. So they change signs. They move slowly through the signs. This axis sort of moves around the zodiac like that. And they change sign every 18 months. And the North Node is the point. It was referred to in traditional Indian astrology as the dragon's head, and the South Node is the dragon's tail, which I think is just a wonderful image. And the North Node is about, during the period that it's in Gemini, it's a focus on that sign. We're needing to develop and bring real attention and focus to Gemini and what Gemini is about. So that includes lung health, but it includes our capacity to really communicate and really communicate well and to speak. And I think some people are going to be sort of rising up. Perhaps some people who've always maybe held back and not spoken are going to find themselves going, you know what, I've got something to say. And hopefully it will be positive and helpful. With Venus in Gemini, that's really helpful because, Venus at her best is all about sharing from the heart. So, and Gemini is also about education. So, education, whole education systems are just in a whole new place around the planet as well. And people are going to be finding new ways to manage this. And the South Node, the opposite point's in Sagittarius. And so the South Node is more about, well, this is where we've come from. So the media has got a lot to do with Sagittarius and Gemini. The media is a big piece of this. And, what is true and what is, that term that we're all sick to death of now, fake news, because it's been so overused, particularly by one particular person, that it just becomes meaningless after a while. But, how do you know that what you're hearing and reading is actually true? And so these are some of the themes and issues, because there's so much information and there's so many theories about, where there's what is the virus, where did it come from, what's its purpose? There's so many different ideas, and it can all be a bit of a whirlpool of, just mental confusion in a way. So how to sift through all of this and kind of find what piece seems to resonate as truth for you. So that's a big part of what we're going to be, in the next 18 months. But I think it's fascinating that North Node comes into Gemini while Venus is now going to be in Gemini for quite a while, and also Hygeia, the goddess of medicine and healing, is this sign.
Yeah. And I think, I'm not sure, I think last time, I was wondering myself this morning, Where does Chiron fit into all this? Because we're talking about illness.
Yeah.
Chiron's the wounded healer. What's going on with Chiron at the moment?
Yeah, yes, exactly. Well, Chiron is the wounded healer. And when I do sessions with people, and if Chiron's really active for them at the time, I'll kind of tell them the whole story, because the story is very rich and full of meaning and imagery and symbolism. But basically, Chiron causes us, when it's active, to address our wounds. Now, the wounds can be psychological, emotional wounds from our past. They can be spiritual, a sense of spiritual wounding, and they can be wounds that manifest in the physical body in the form of an injury or an illness. So Chiron is an archetype that is about wounding, but he's also the great healer, teacher, shaman, guide, the great wise soul. And his message is always, when it's active in the collective as it is now, or in our own personal chart at any given time in our life, wounds are going to be coming to the surface, or something might happen. We might have an injury, we might get sick. And it's an opportunity to go deeper, So it's like his message is, don't just try and cover the wound over. This is a doorway. This is literally a portal, a sacred. We could go as far as I call it a sacred wound. And it's an opportunity to really look deeper at, what is this showing me? And to not expect an easy, quick, simple answer. It's a process and a journey. Like Melanie Reinhardt wrote the first really and very wonderful book on Chiron back because it was only discovered in 1977. And she called her book Chiron, the Healing Journey. And I do see Chiron very much in that way. He takes us on a journey it's a healing journey of deeper discovery. And will sometimes actually awaken the healer in a person, So, because we all have healing gifts, I truly believe that, and our own innate healing gifts come out of our own healing journey. We're all on this path of healing and growth and transformation and awakening, and Chiron is a big player in that, I've discovered. Right. And so, so he's in Aries now, has been for 2 years, and is spending quite a long time in this sign, because he spends a different amount of time in the different signs, and it's about sort of 8 years or so. And Aries is about courage and bravery and boldness, and it's the sign of the warrior. And there's the dysfunctional, crude, aggressive, bully warrior. And then there's the true warrior spirit that lives in us, that has courage and steps up to fight the good fight, And I have noticed, because the sun's in Aries now too, as is the black moon, but with Chiron, but, there is talk about treating this virus like a war. And I kind of get it on one level, like when there's a world war, like everything else stops, because now we have to deal with this. So in that way, I get it, but I don't really like speaking of it in that way. I think the coronavirus is more a chironic message, to for us all collectively and individually to find the courage to really move forward in our lives in a very new way, because Aries is about the new, stepping boldly, where no man has been before, Starship Enterprise boldly goes where no man has been before is such an Aries statement. And it's like that. And so we're having to all find, so what new, we're all in a new, like everyone's saying, we're all in a new place. This is new. God, this is new. This is, if I hear unprecedented one more time, I think I'll scream. But, but it is. It's completely new. We're in new territory.
Yeah. And I think what I've seen too is, and you've probably covered this so far, but just to say it, there's been this shift from me to we society.
Yes.
You know, it's been all about us as individuals, and that, you know, was a sign of our times. But from my perspective, I see that we're sort of moving on from that. And if you're not we, then we don't want you. Basically, you know, we want you to be part of that we society.
That's
about
right.
thinking about everybody, not just yourself.
That's right. That's the whole balance between Aries and Libra. That's the whole story between. So if there's too much Libra, we're lost in other people and relationship and completely neglecting our own individuality. If there's too much Aries, you know, we're only focused on ourselves and don't really care or have any compassion for other people. So, you know, that this is always with signs opposite each other. They hold this polarity, and a balance is not a static thing either. You know, it's kind of moving, but you don't want it to be like that. You know, it needs to be more like this. So this full moon, which you mentioned straight up, is absolutely heightening our awareness around that. You know, the balance between me and other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really amazes me. You know, I've been, since I last spoke to you, I've been reading and learning a lot more about astrology.
Great.
and coming to appreciate it, you know. And as I see it playing out in society, I can see even small examples of that, you know. There's sort of like this rebalancing going on of even just something simple like petrol prices, which have been ripping people off for ages. But now they're coming down. Yesterday, I think they said it was like 99 cents a litre. So there's this rebalancing of things that have been like this for such a long time are coming back into play to be a little bit fairer, you know.
Yes.
And the same with my, you know, with people who are having their unemployment benefits increased. A little fairer to make life easier. You know, I don't know how people could ever survive on what they were getting paid. You know, that was just unfair. That was like a token payment. So, and that's not, treating people like that is not the sign of an advanced society in my books.
No, no, it's not. I agree. That's right. It's this idea of every man for himself, and that low payment, it was almost like a punitive punishment in a way. Well, you know, that's all you deserve, you know, because you haven't got your act together.
Yeah.
And it's a complete lack of understanding of, you know, people's reality.
Absolutely. So what else is playing out astrologically?
Okay, so the other thing that I think is worth speaking, look, I want to talk for a minute about Mercury, which, by the way, is the ruler of Gemini. But again, you know, we've not too long ago come out of a Mercury retrograde period, and it was one of the toughest that people have experienced, and that was that Mercury retrograde period. I think I thought I'd made. Oh, hang on, here we go. And anyway, Mercury was in the sign of Pisces from like early February. And again, Mercury normally would move really quickly through a sign, but it stayed in Pisces for quite a long time because it went through 3 weeks of a retrograde phase through February, March, while the sun was in Pisces. And even before the coronavirus really fully came to our shores, we were aware of it as an issue. It was, you know, the story was growing around the world. And you know, Pisces rules the immune system, and Mercury has got quite a lot to do with health and illness, actually. I mean, one of Mercury's primary symbols is the caduceus, and the caduceus is a symbol that, you know, modern medicine uses. And so I really see that period of Mercury in Pisces, and it's still in Pisces. It's still slowly coming, making its way. It's not retrograde anymore, but it was a tough retrograde, that one. Even if people weren't sick, it was a toughie. Most people really struggled. And then it went direct, and now it's kind of moving on, but it won't come out of Pisces until April the 11th, which is not very far off. and it will finally come out of Pisces into the sign of Aries. And I think, you know, I notice these things. I kind of track them a bit just because I'm so interested. We're going to notice there's going to be a feeling of, oh, at last, you know, like really just in the field, because it was quite difficult and people are exhausted. A lot of people are feeling incredibly exhausted.
Yeah.
And yes, and I'm feeling that there will be a new, like a feeling, like the sun is in Aries, which is energizing for some, you know, that's good. But when Mercury comes into Aries, I think that's really going to help people's energy levels and give us a little bit of momentum and a sense more of, like, while it's in Pisces, there's still this feeling of kind of letting go and just feeling a little helpless even in some cases. Like, I just, but when it comes into Aries, there's a bit of action. You know, Aries is a sign of action. Okay, I can see maybe how I can move with this.
So is it like a jump start?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, you know, I used to kind of almost have this attitude about Mercury. Oh, it's just a little Mercury. It just moves through and it's not that important. But I've come over the years to recognize Mercury's quite important. And, you know, he's often referred to as the trickster, and he can really cause a lot of mischief. You know, he's a little bit of a troublemaker sometimes. And so, yeah, I think it will feel quite like a relief when it comes into Aries again. I mean, for me, you know, I natally have Mercury in Pisces, and the retrograde period was challenging for me as well. But since it came out, you know, I'm feeling pretty good because it sort of is very familiar to me. It's not unfamiliar at all. So everyone, again, as I said earlier, responds differently.
Yeah. And when you talk about retrograde, it just means that it's focusing on that, because it, you know, it appears to be going backwards. So it might have moved through a sign, but it appears to be going backwards. So it's staying focused on that particular energy at that time, so we feel it more predominantly.
That's right. And also in that period, it's moving more slowly. And it's like when a planet's in direct motion, which it is most of the time, each of the planets, it's just moving forward and getting on with what it's getting on with, yeah? And there's a general feeling of momentum. When they appear to stop and stand still for a while and then slowly kind of go back, it can feel like a bit of a grind. But its purpose is to go deeper, and often causes us, I have to go back and address something back here. So we're dealing with like old material. Things from the past come up. Sometimes people from our past just pop up out of the blue from nowhere, you know, and so something that was perhaps a bit unfinished from back there, you know, okay, here it is, it's come back, it's up now.
Yeah. So it's a bit like shining a torchlight very slowly across something.
That's right.
And then going back and then stopping.
That's right.
Yeah, and then that's really, like, bright lights.
That's right. And so it's, okay, I have to deal with this, because that's right. And then when it starts to move forward and move away from that place that it was just in, you know, it's okay, now we can move on. There's a bit of momentum forwards again. Yeah. And look, honestly, there are some periods in the year when we get a whole bunch of planets retrograde at the same time. And that's usually a fairly deep period. And in Australia, that's usually in the winter period that happens. Yeah. But they're very purposeful. You know, we go deeper, and it can be a good time to do research and, you know, go deep and process things. Yeah.
So all these influences, they're moving over us all the time, and there's cycles within cycles within cycles, and we have cycles within us, and they're as they move, they trigger some of those various cycles according to the planets, and and make themselves known to us, whether it's consciously or how we feel. Or I remember it once a few years ago, I felt like I was, moving through treacle. My emotions were just so bleh. And I looked it up, and it had to do with cancer at the time, the sign of cancer. So, and my friend who was living with me at the time, she said, "Oh, I'm feeling exactly the same way." So I looked up her chart, and she had that there too. So it's an amazing and almost magical, what we would call magical, because, and a lot of people discard astrology because they don't understand there are mechanics in it of these cycles, and it's an ancient science that astronomy grew out of, really, from my understanding.
It did.
So it's not nonsense to, although a lot of people have said that to me, they've just discarded it. And I think, what a waste that you don't take the time to understand this. It sounds like a lot of, babble to some people, because astrologers, when they get together, they speak about these things, and that's all you hear. And it's a lot of, they're speaking their own language because they understand it.
That's right.
What they're saying are just symbols. The words for Saturn are symbols for restriction, suppression, order, structure. The word Saturn just represents those energies. So that's why there's that language,
Yes,
the language.
Absolutely, it is a language, and it's a language that anybody can learn if there's an interest in that. And I remember when I first began to learn it, like, it was the most exciting thing I'd ever come across in my life. It was just thrilling to me. It was like unlocking keys, having keys to unlock doors.
Yeah. And you can unlock the psychology of an individual.
Yes.
That's what I think is really interesting.
Because there are layers and layers and layers, and I've come to know that, an astrology birth chart, a natal chart, a horoscope functions on so many levels and actually addresses anything you could think of. There are so many branches to astrology. Astrologers specialize in politics or medical astrology or psychology or spirituality or history. You can go back in time and look at history through the lens of astrology, and there are just, there are financial astrologers. I mean, there's so many amazing fields, and people work with astrology in their own particular way, depending on their own nature and areas of interest.
So there was one more thing I wanted to ask you. It was about Eris.
Yes.
Because I think you said in one of your newsletters that we're all born with Eris in our chart. Is that right?
All born with Eris in Aries.
Oh, Aries, sorry. Yes. So tell us about that.
Well, Eris is a recently discovered, what's officially classified as a minor planet. I don't know if anyone recalls, back in 2005, I think it was, might be wrong, I think it was something like that. Pluto was demoted to minor planet status, which made astrologers around the world chuckle. Oh, you think you can demote Pluto, the powerhouse of the zodiac? But anyway, he was. The astronomers kind of classified him as a minor planet. And since then, any new planets, bodies orbiting our sun, way out there, but in our orbit, have been sort of included in that classification of minor planet. So Eris was discovered, I think it was around 2005. It was originally given the name Xena. Oh, how I wish it was still called Xena, but but it was eventually called Eris. And usually the astronomer who discovers a planet is given the right and the honour to name it, and they usually follow the tradition of taking names from classical mythology. So who is Eris? So astrologers then get this information of this planet, its name, its orbit, start putting it in charts, And one of the first clues we get to trying to understand what it's about is to look at the name and the mythology. Who is Eris in mythology? And read about her story. Okay, there's some really good clues, because it's uncanny how the name actually resonates with what the planet's about. Because I believe that's true of our own name. I think our parents all get the right name. And even if we change our name at some point, the original name is still relevant energetically. So Eris was a goddess who was regarded as difficult, a troublemaker. She's called the goddess of discord and disharmony. And there was a wedding and all these gods and goddesses were invited. It was, big, wonderful, fabulous wedding. Eris was not invited. It's like the 13th fairy. She's not invited because she's difficult and she'll probably just cause trouble. So it's kind of symbolic of, if we don't address the shadow, it's going to get a bit pissed off, and it will actually erupt and probably be more problematic. So it's more wise to actually include it and address it. That's very symbolic. So what does Eris do? She turns up anyway. So she gate crashes. And through her actions, she offers a golden apple as a prize for who is considered the most beautiful of all the goddesses there. And that competition stirs up all this envy amongst these goddesses, and this whole conflict and drama. And I won't go into the whole story, there's a whole story, but her actions eventually caused the Trojan War. That one incident caused the Trojan War and the sacking of Troy. So she is very much about, if you don't respect me and honor me and give me my due, there'll be hell to pay. So she's like this aspect, I think, of the feminine that sooner or later is just going to get really pissed off and raise her head and, become like a fierce dragon. It's that kind of energy. One astrologer, I think this is a really good way to think of her, is she's like the whistleblower that reveals the truth that people don't want to look at. Yeah. And she's been, because she's so far out there, so far away from the sun, her orbit's very, very slow. So she's been in Aries since about the 1920s. Yes. So pretty well all of us alive on the planet today have Eris slowly moving through the sign of Aries. And she doesn't leave for another, I looked it up not long ago and I forget, I think it's around about the 2040s or 50s or something like that. But what's relevant now, she's playing a part in everything that's happened, because she's in the squares I mentioned before, from Aries to the planets in Capricorn, to the Saturn-Pluto story in Capricorn. So she has a part to play in this. She is, again, it's this reference to the virus as a war. She's causing such disruption and chaos. So she's the goddess of chaos and discord. She's just chaos and mayhem has been unleashed on the planet, if you like. So, but it's forcing, like issues can't be swept under the carpet. Like I've been reading about what's happening in India, and it's just revealing so, and in America, everywhere, it's revealing so much that can't be hidden away for much longer. And it's shocking, it's kind of, it's incredibly shock, it's sudden, it's hitting hard. But yeah, yeah, she's not a comfortable energy. And some people in their chart, because she's so strong this year, I'm putting her in charts if I think it's relevant, you know. So when somebody sees me, I'm doing sessions online, of course, now, if I feel it might be relevant, I'm including Eris in the chart, just because she's so much a part of the current story and situation.
So you said that you said she was discovered in 1920s. Was that right? Did you?
No, she's been in Aries since the 1920s.
Oh, sorry.
She was discovered around 2005.
Oh, okay, right. So having been in Aries in the 1920s is really interesting because it ties in with the suffragette movement, doesn't it?
It does. It absolutely does.
Yeah. So yes, that energy, just that strong female warrior sort
That's
of
right.
Urba.
That's right. Rising up.
Comfortable.
Yes. That's right.
Yeah, and I think that might explain because I do collage and I made a card called Restless Disturber. And I think, oh, maybe Eris was that energy that was coming through, that restless disturber, you know.
Yes. So, you know, you have this image of there's a beautiful wedding, you know, and everything's lovely and beautiful. And then Eris comes in. Uh-oh. You know, and so, you know, the world, I mean, we've known for a long time the world's not been in good shape. But, you know, it's business as usual, carry on. And then we had fires, which is an Aries energy. And then the virus happened, you know, and no, it looks like we're not going to carry on as usual. Everything's not okay.
No.
So she reveals and exposes as the whistleblower.
Maybe blowing the whistle on how easily life can be wiped out, how complacent we've been, how we've been continually using resources in an unlimited way, in a limited planet, all those types of things. Just blowing the whistle big time on everything.
Big time. And you know, I've been thinking too, I wonder how in months and a few years ahead of this, like there's wars on the planet, you know, many countries have spent untold amounts of obscene amounts of money on military and so on. I wonder if this will cause a change in that, if this reality is going to cause a bit of a kind of change of attitude around for countries and leaders around war and military. It may not. It may actually even activate and trigger something.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm sort of interested to see how that unfolds. Like, you know, even now with current wars that are happening on the planet, and now there's a virus, and some of those countries at war, you know, in a terrible state, like there's just, you know, huge refugee camps and so on. So how's all that going to look in a year or two, you know?
Yeah, I think we're sort of in a balancing point of balance, like things can go either way, you know, it's a 50-50 chance of going, you know, world peace or world strife, because while all this restrictions going on, we're getting, sorry, I didn't turn off my email, you know, there's countries are going to become more self-sufficient, I think, after this, and they're going to resource create their own medicines in their own country, put more factories on so we can get all our goods in our own country, and our borders are going to be tightened up for each country. And that'll be okay in the short term, but how's it going to look in 10 years' time?
Yes.
When one country is producing something that another country wants.
That's right.
And I've been thinking, is this a potential for a backstep? You know, what's going to happen there? That's
right. It's very interesting. And I think this is also, this brings me to the nodes in Gemini Sagittarius as well, because in that arena of life, that's got a lot to do with trade and international relationships, you know, Sagittarius, Gemini, and how we can move around the world, you know, travel, trade, all of, and, you know, relationships between countries. Isn't it fascinating that Brexit finally happened just before the coronavirus hit? You know, I think, wow, that's fascinating timing, you know, given that it took forever to sort of get to that point. Yeah, very, very interesting.
Yeah. So I suppose we better round this up. Was there anything else that you wanted to say? Because I think that's enough for people to percolate on for a while.
I think so too. That's a lot. We've covered a lot, but you know, there is a lot happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pop and on the underneath this on YouTube. I'm going to put your website so that people can contact you if they want to have a personal reading.
Thank you.
And head them your way, because you're now doing readings online.
That's right, and they can also find me on Facebook, just my name, Babula Clement.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you so much.
A pleasure, Cheryl, as always.
We'll be back in the new moon in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So, and we'll be back with you, everyone, to talk about that and any sort of changes with the planetary alignment. So.
Yeah, and I'd just like to encourage everyone to maybe go outside. You know, our skies are pretty clear at the moment over these next few nights, and just really drink in this beautiful moonlight. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Cheryl.
Bye.